Welcome to Rocknrollworldmagazine. This is Reverend William, and today our guest is the legendary Hall of Fame bassist from the original Alice Cooper group, Mr. Dennis Dunaway. How are you doing today?
Good. How you doing, Reverend William?
I'm doing fantastic. If I was any better, I'd probably be a twin. Uh, I I wanted to thank you for taking your time out to be able to speak with us today. The one thing that I definitely wanted to touch on was your book that's been out for close to a year now, Snakes, Guillotines, Electric Chairs, and Your Adventures in the Alice Cooper Group. Um,
Yes, it came out on St. Martin's Press last June, and it's available wherever books are sold, they say, or you can just go to DennisDunaway.com and find the book and all kinds of things that I'm up to.
Outstanding. I had seen that you were able to get autographed copies like through your website.
Yes, you can get a copy, or you can get the hardcover book. You can get the Audible just released my audio version of the book, which I narrate myself. That came out last week. Uh, Actually, yeah, almost a week ago. But that's available also. Just go to DennisDunaway.com and go to book, and you'll see Amazon tab and Audible tab, and you're there.
Oh,
But
that's
it's me reading the book myself, which was quite a surprisingly difficult undertaking, but that's because I wanted to get it perfect, all of the tone and, and it's 90,000 words, so the finished audiobook is 10 hours and 57 minutes long. And it took me 4 full days of recording to come up with what they edited down to that.
that's incredible. But it's not bad that you can have a book read to you in 10 hours. You know.
Right. Well, audiobooks are quite popular. A lot of people like to put them on when they're driving. My wife and I did have the Keith Richards live, and that's 11 CDs. His book was much thicker than mine, but we drove, all the way to Buffalo and back, and still hadn't heard the whole thing, but it was great.
That's outstanding. That's, I was going through your book and that, and I was kind of curious. Have you ever been like with a group of authors and they'll be discussing like, I believe the Industrial Revolution was the best, and where they might be going into discussion of your books and like in your book you kind of go into the well, this one time we either did or didn't throw a chicken from the stage. Have you ever like been with a bunch of authors and kind of blow them away with the topics of your book?
Well, that's what's so exciting about being an author, and I use the term loosely in my particular instance, but I'm meeting all kinds of authors, all different kinds of books. Unbelievable, people that write about Abraham Lincoln and people that write about Frank Sinatra and Tom Petty and you name it. The thing that's great is that everybody's got. I've been doing a lot of shows that are for authors. Like in Miami, they have one that had 600 authors, and I met so many people that write about all different sorts of things. But still, you're sort of in the same club because you're an author.
Oh,
There's
definitely.
different, and there are different cliques, I guess. I haven't been at it long enough to quite figure it all out, but like if you go to a Grateful Dead concert, there's the deadheads from the old days, and then there's the young deadheads, and they kind of have their own section of the arena that they would sit in.
uh,
So
de-
I think there's a little bit of that, but I love it. It's so exciting. The literary circles of New York City, it's very vibrant. It's similar. It reminds me of what the record industry used to be like, but that's long gone. But thankfully, people still want to have a book in their hand. If they don't, they can get the audio version, but most people still want to have a tangible book in their hand, and therefore, it hasn't gone the route that digital has done, the damaging effects on music as far as people not buying the product, not paying for the product.
Right, right. I am the same along my lines. I don't like the digital downloads, and it's too easy for me to delete. And I like the whole. I have an album in my hands, or I like the feeling of pages, and I'm very much, I guess, a tangible guy. That I like all that feeling, and I guess.
Right,
And
me too. I agree totally. And it's interesting that young people are getting into vinyl again, and it seems like they're sort of getting that experience.
right, right. That's it's our my granddaughter comes over a lot, and her favorite is actually Led Zeppelin 2, and I love that that like she can identify it right by seeing the album, and pop it out, and and definitely wants to listen to it. I mean, that's way too young, but I mean, it's exciting that vinyl is coming back, and there's with technology more and more inserts that can be added, and I guess different things that can be done with vinyl that
Yeah, well, it's easier to record digitally because if you make a mistake, or even if you play a note that's just a little bit, just a fraction of a second behind the bass drum or whatever, you can fix it. The problem is, the temptation is once you start fixing this note, oh, wait a minute, that note too, oh, that note too. Next thing you know, you edit all of the life out of it. It becomes sterile. It loses the feel.
right, right.
Now, talking about Led Zeppelin, the Alice Cooper group played at the Whiskey A Go-Go in 1969. It was Alice Cooper and Led Zeppelin.
That would be an
And,
interesting mix.
well, it was one of their first shows in America, so we were both up-and-coming groups. We
Wow.
even flipped a coin to decide who would open and who would close.
All that. Who won?
I can't remember who won, but we opened.
That I was actually prior to speaking to you, I was speaking with one of my friends, and you think back at the time that the Alice Cooper group came out, that for lack of better terms, but that the hippies were out on the rampage, and how many people's minds you must have blown that would have come to a concert perhaps under the influence of hallucinogenics, and next thing you know, here's somebody who's hanging themselves on the stage and chopping up baby dolls, and you know, I think at that time maybe like throwing like watermelons and stuff into the crowd, that it must have just kind of been a real mind melt to the crowd.
Well, these are all of the stories that are in my book, but yes, we love that element of surprise, especially people that came thinking Alice Cooper had to be a female folk singer.
Mm.
And they'd show up and we'd be throwing chickens at them.
Ha! Surprise, surprise. That
Yeah,
that
we
that.
love that element of surprise, and there was a period there where we didn't play a show that didn't. I mean, sometimes it would be to the extent of us walking into the venue to do a sound check, and the guy who hired us flipping out because that's not who he thought he hired. Oh no, you guys. Oh no, where's Alan? Where's the singer? Where's the female folk singer? No, we promise we'll tone down our show, and of course we never would.
Right, right. I remember back in the days, my uncles would tell me like they went and seen the Alice Cooper group, and they would tell me like the what I thought at the time was an urban legend of like dancing toothbrushes and carrots, and the chickens, and of course I've learned later on in life that it wasn't an urban legend, but and I think really since that point of time I've always been stuck on it, which is funny that they used to beat me up if I had like a Kiss album, because it was you can't listen to these guys who wear makeup, but yet then they
Yeah, well,
like.
that was that era. It was, you know, you did, they called us shock rock. Well, you look at what's happened since that era. That that's back in the '60s. There was a different mindset of what was acceptable by bands. The Rolling Stones were really considered really edgy then, and so every artist tend to push the limits. But a group coming out that's five guys with a girl's name and the way we dressed with this androgynous, glitter look, it was shocking at the time. Nobody had ever dreamt of something that outrageous. And then not only that, but our show incorporated hangings and electrocutions and all kinds of things. So it was shocking for that time. It's like now you would have to do more than that to be shocking, I think.
Oh, definitely.
But artists always push the boundaries, and that's just a natural progression of art.
There's a newer band that I'm fond of them, a few songs, and but when they do a stage performance, they have like nurses come out and they'll dance with like 4 foot long hypodermic needles, and there'll be the background will be set up like spider webs and such, and it's kind of like in your brain it's clicking like Alice Cooper called, he wants his show back, and then of course you see other aspects, it's like, oop, that's Manson, like you can kind of really see the influences.
Right. Well, the Alice Cooper group had our influences. The British invasion was where we got all of our inspirations. But what you do is you have your influences, you have things that you like, but you take all of those influences and then you make them your own and take it somewhere new. There's people that only, I always think of it like a baby learns to crawl, and then it learns to walk, and then it learns to run, and what you want to do is eventually you want to run a world record and do something that nobody's ever done before. But there's varying degrees. It depends on what somebody's happy with doing. There's such a thing as a great wedding band, and that's all they do. And people would put that down, but there's an art to that, and there's some incredible wedding bands out there, and that's what they do, and they're happy doing that. So, but, for us, we wanted to take, Pete Townsend smashing his guitar and Jimi Hendrix, and the Yardbirds with all of their progressive feedbacks and everything, and then the melodic songwriting of the Kinks and the Beatles, and all of those were influences on us, and all we did is dress it up a little bit differently because we wanted to bring Halloween into the picture, and we love Vincent Price movies, we love all of the horror movies, and it was interesting and also frustrating at times how society, it would be okay if your kids were watching a monster movie on television, but if they came to our show, all of a sudden we are, ruining their children. Basically all it was a horror movie on stage,
Right. I often like well, first I would say if nobody has ever seen Alice Cooper live, that you have to go, in your time, you have to go see it. And I kind of say it's kind of like kind of like a rock opera, with all the theatrics and everything, that it's, not only is the music very, very entertaining, but the theatrics are a major portion in the show itself.
Well, we had a couple of philosophies. One was, if you want to just hear the music, just stay at home and listen to the record,
Right.
But if you want to go out and see a show, then you should get more. You should get visual and audio. So, there were bands that would just stand there and play, and there's nothing wrong with that, but our philosophy was we're going to give people something to talk about, and we're going to give them something that they can't get from just the music. and
Right.
then the other part of it was we wanted to reflect society, so we and we started doing that when we lived in Hollywood, so it was very glitzy and very sparkly and everything. And then when we got to Detroit, then we got a heavier edge, and then when we got to Greenwich, Connecticut, then we became the $1 billion babies and became spoiled rich kid brats. So we would reflect our environment and artistically anyway. And then also we had this thing about early on when people hated what we were doing because it was too avant-garde. People couldn't leave the room fast enough. After about 3 songs, people would be screaming insults and leaving, and which we kind of liked. Actually, we encouraged that. But then we got the idea. Okay, well, how can somebody criticize our show if we include them in the show? So that's when we started throwing giant weather balloons into the crowd, and nobody had done anything like that before us. But giant balloons, and then when the balloon would pop, uh, actual money would come out, and confetti and smoke, and there'd be all kinds of surprises inside the balloons. And then we would rip open feather pillows and blow them all over to Kingdom Come with a fire extinguisher, and we'd be packed up and down the road to the next state before those feathers would land.
Yeah.
And then that led to it just kept getting more and more bizarre to where we would incorporate anything into the show. That just grab something backstage and bring it on stage and incorporate it into the show. So the show kept evolving at a very fast rate back then. And people that would follow the band would say, I can't believe it. This is like a completely different show than you did last night in that other state.
Well, they just left
We're
more
like, right.
stuff. They just left more stuff backstage.
Yeah, well, that's what we wanted to do. We wanted somebody to walk out thinking, oh my God, that show was so crazy, and then they tell their friend about it and say, you got to see these guys. They did this and this and this, and then the friend comes, and we don't do any of the things that he told them that we do. We do something completely different. So we did that for actually a few years. It was going pretty strong. Where one show we might have uh, rolling tires across the stage and have shiny silver corrugated aluminum behind the stage, and we'd all be wearing chrome jumpsuits, and then we'd have these bright photo flood lights so that we would make the stage so bright that people couldn't look at the stage, but there was so much stuff going on that they had to. Just ideas like that. We do that for one night, and then we do something else the next night. But all of those costumes, and also you mentioned the dancing tooth. That was my wife, Cindy, who's Neil Smith's sister, and she designed all of the costumes for the original group, which I have a museum now called Dr. Drury's Snakes Museum of Rare Alice Cooper Artifacts, and it will be on display for the second time ever in New Jersey, April 22nd to 24th, at Chiller Theater Expo in Parsippany, New Jersey. This exhibit has everything. It's mind-boggling. From when Alice and I met when we were 16 years old at Cortez High School in Phoenix, Arizona, we were on the cross-country team. And I still have those shoes. I have leather sweaters. I have things that belonged to Alice before we ever started the band. I have things throughout our career, all the way up to things from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction.
Really, that sounds like an outstanding time in that's we've been trying to think of a road trip that we wanted to do, and we're looking, nobody likes just to do a road trip without any kind of direction, but I think that definitely just gave us a direction. Is Blue, are you going to be playing out there with Blue Coop during that time period in Parsippany?
Let's see. We have we'll be at BB King's on the 26th of this month. I don't, I can't remember right offhand what we have in April. If you saw my calendar, you would laugh. I'm extremely busy these days. Blue Coop had a rehearsal last night in New York City, and everything sounded really good after our half a year break that we just had due to Albert had surgery. He's all better now, and we're raring to go again. But it's as opposed to playing those songs every week, all of a sudden taking that break and then getting together and going, oh yeah, this is. Now I remember how much fun this is.
Oh yeah, it's got to be a blast, during any kind of any sort of break to get back into the groove of playing again. It's got.
Well, we've got between our histories, Joe and Albert with Blue Oyster Cult have quite a catalog of amazing songs, and then we can dip into the Alice Cooper catalog, and we can do hits, we can do deep cuts, but also Blue Coop have 2 albums out. Tornado on the Tracks was our first one, and Robbie Krieger played on it, and Goldie McJohn from Steppenwolf, and a lot of guests, but basically it's Joe and Albert and I, and we have a particular sound that sounds like classic rock, but it's got a fresh twist to it. And then our latest CD, Million Miles More, was produced by Jack Douglas. So we have a really solid following for our own songs. So we will mix it up. We have we could play a 3-hour set and still be discussing what songs that we would have to leave out.
Right. That's I always like you see a lot of some headliners now, they will hit the 1 hour mark and they'd be done. But one thing I like about a lot of classic rock and stuff like that is generally they're going to put on, a good show, time wise, like you said, a 3-hour set.
Well, we've both been to the arena level, and we used to do 2.5-hour sets, so we're kind of used to that. And also, when you have so many good songs, it's hard not to.
Right.
I never get tired of playing those songs. As soon as you hear that opening riff for "Don't Fear the Reaper," you're in a good mood.
Oh,
You
definitely.
hear "School's Out" or whatever. It's just sort of a timeless thing. It's not like it's not like we had a hit song, "Yummy, Yummy, Yummy" or something, and we 3 years after it's a hit, we're sick of playing it.
Right.
I shouldn't say that though. Maybe the guys that wrote that still enjoy it. That could be.
They might.
Now we have also the Darlings of the Demented, Tish and Snooky from Manic Panic in New York City. They do Manic Panic does the bright colored hair dyes that almost every celebrity you see with colorful hair uses Manic Panic.
Okay.
And the 2 sisters sing background with Blue Coop. So we have 2 brothers singing, we have 2 sisters singing, and the blend is great.
Oh, that's outstanding. And in your book, what was your favorite Alice Cooper group myth that you might have touched on? Or reality?
We did talk about the chicken incident in Toronto. That's the excerpt from that is if you go to RollingStone.com, they actually posted an excerpt from my audiobook that's talking about the what really happened for the chicken incident.
Right. They
So I think that's probably the one that people like the best because they've heard so many different variations of that story over the years. The other one is, because my wife and I have been together throughout the band's history. She found our managers, Joe Greenberg and Shep Gordon, back in the 60s. and we needed managers before Frank Zappa would sign us to his label. We had 3 days to find managers, and she found them. And the story keeps changing, but it goes from like Lester Chambers of the Chambers Brothers to Jimi Hendrix and all kinds of things. But it was actually my wife who found our managers.
That's
She wasn't my wife at the time. She was Neil's sister at the time doing costumes for the band, but we became an item.
I guess that would be a relationship that you want to go well, because you don't want the costume designer agitated at you. I swear,
Well, I also didn't want the drummer agitated at me.
No, you didn't. Sit there flinging drumsticks at you throughout the whole thing, the whole show. Or drum heads.
We've been married for a lot of years, and that also helped with the book, and it also helped keep the stories clear, because her and I were both there for everything, and she kept daily diaries, and so I had all kinds of stuff to sort of double check on, the accuracy of my stories and stuff like that. But I also, because I was the quiet, observant artist, that wrote down things. If somebody said something I thought was clever, mostly I wrote down things that I either thought I just think that's funny and I want to remember it, or something that I thought, oh, this might be a good lyric for a song or a good title for an album or whatever. So I just wrote all kinds of things down on pieces of paper from Holiday Inn or whatever and tossed them in the bottom of my suitcase, and I still have most of those. So when I look back through them, it confirms various stories that are different than what people have been hearing over the years. It depends. Some people prefer the legend. Okay, it's great that Jimi Hendrix found Alice Cooper's managers, but personally, I think it's more interesting to hear what really happened.
That is definitely interesting, and it's to know that, like the ideas that came from within the group, and then, your now wife, who, she found your manager, did the costumes, etc., etc., and how much, that, I mean, that to me, that real fact is, very, very interesting, because it's, you think of all these bands that have like, oh, this 800 people wrote this song, and where it really comes down to, everything was done from within, the band and the band family type element.
Right. What most people, it seems like there's a lot of Alice Cooper fans that kind of jumped on board after the original group. And at that point, they were promoting everything as being Alice's ideas, and a lot of people, that's all they know. What they don't realize is that Alice wears makeup because I thought of the idea, and he uses a snake because Neil thought of the idea, and he has executions because I thought of the idea, and he has these great hit songs because Michael Bruce wrote them. So everybody collaborated on everything. We were always very passionate and loudly passionate about our ideas, but it had to do with what we were going to wear on stage, what notes we were going to play next in a song that we were writing. Everything about the Alice Cooper group was a 5-person collaboration in our rehearsal room. And then we brought in Bob Ezrin because we didn't have a hit single. We really needed a hit single. And Bob came in, and he was, we were discussing earlier, you and I, about the sarcastic humor that we had, and people that came into our world, especially our rehearsal room, which was sacred ground. Even our roadies steered clear, generally. But our loud, it sounded like we were arguing all the time, but it was really just passionate about your ideas. And we had a rule that you couldn't throw out anybody's idea until you really gave it a heartfelt try. And then we would vote. And whoever's idea won, then the guy who didn't win that was the end of it. There was no grudge. So all of the discussions, the heated discussions, or the just constructive conversation was all for the right reason. It was all about what's going to be the best thing for this band to do. And it was never like, personal. It was never insulting somebody personally. That was completely different. That was just our sense of humor, because we knew each other since we were young teenagers, and we would put each other down all the time, and it was just ongoing, and that was our humor. So there were people that would come, within earshot of our rehearsal room and think, "Oh man, these guys hate each other."
That's a good thing to hear too. Like I was saying before, that sometimes with my humor, I have to break in the I'm just kidding, before people thought
Right.
I was a real jerk. But when I
We
become
had a lot of that. But see, Bob
yeah,
Ezrin came in, and he was baptized by the fires of our sarcastic humor, and he didn't just flee. He started firing a few back, so he was in. He
that's
was
always a
in.
plus. That's I become, when I'm passionate about a subject, I become loud, and I need to kind of be heard about my feelings on that, and of why I feel that. And oftentimes it's misconstrued as being a jerk and yelling, and it's like, no, it's I was just trying to sell my point. It's not that.
Right. Well,
You know,
that's all good. I think it's good that people care about what they're saying enough to get their blood up over it.
right, and that's
You could be, things would be mighty bland in this world if nobody ever did that.
right, and it's a lot more interesting, kind of a slightly heated conversation as opposed to I don't know. It's like I don't even know how to respond to that. I don't know. It's but moving forward here from the I don't know thing. You Alice had recently announced that he is working on 2 new albums, one with the Hollywood Vampires, and also working with one that where you and Neil will be on it. And have you been busy writing away for?
Neil and I are on the Hollywood Vampires album. We played on Schools Out, Another Brick in the Wall,
Oh,
along with Slash and Johnny Depp and uh, Joe Perry and oh God, who else is on there? Brian Johnson from AC/DC sings on it.
oh yeah, yeah.
So Neil and I played on the Hollywood Vampires album on that one cut. But what we're doing now is Michael and Neil and Alice are out in Phoenix, Arizona, and they're writing some songs together, and I'm sending a bunch of demos out to them, and Alice is calling me, and Bob Ezrin is in touch. So we're just throwing around some musical ideas. We had so much fun recently in Dallas. Alice did a surprise sit-in with the rest of us, and the original group did a surprise performance in a record store.
Right.
And we did 6 or 7 songs and had a blast, and the internet went crazy. It was lit up like unbelievable.
I got to say that I did share one of those videos out of the surprise of. In fact, my brother, he lives maybe an hour south of Dallas, and I was like, as soon as I heard the rumor that he might be showing up, I'm like, you need to get your ass up to Dallas for me. And of course he didn't go, but I was like, of all times.
Well, the rumor was unfounded, because the only time Alice will ever do anything like that is if nobody knows about it.
Right.
but and that's the thing about that too. Is like ever since then, every time I do anything, people are asking me, and a lot of people are asking me if Alice is going to be there, and I'm like, well, if he was, I wouldn't know about it,
Yeah,
and neither would you. But so you're taking a chance. You can either just pass it up because I can't confirm it, and then miss out if it does happen, or you can just come and see whatever happens.
Right.
Alice will be at the Chiller, where I discussed the Snakes Museum will be at Chiller. Alice will be there. Michael Bruce will be there. So, but there's going to be a lot of musical guests. It's a over the top, crazy, monster science fiction celebrity convention, and it's extremely popular. And we always have a lot of fun. I've been doing it for many years. In fact, it's so sad because 3 years ago, I was hanging out with Keith Emerson. And talk about the nicest guy. He had such a great sense of humor. And at Chiller on Saturday night, they always have this big party, and this band plays, the Dead Elvi, which is the guy who runs this whole big convention. He has a band, and they get all kinds of people to sit in. I mean, they've had Pete Best. They even got Pete Best to sit in. The Monkees are going to be there. All kinds of stuff like that. But you know, last time it was Michael Bruce, Neil Smith, and I played, and Alice was right down the road, and everybody thought that he was going to show up, but we don't know if he's too busy, he can't show up. You know, it's not a big deal. It's like, hey, Alice, you know, if you feel like showing up, good. You know, so that's how it is. But this convention had Keith Emerson, and he sat in with the band, and I was standing right behind him. So there was like a pillar, so I wasn't like just standing on stage, you know, where everybody could see me. I was standing behind this pillar that was right behind him, and I watched him play, and I was mind-boggled at how amazing he still was. And he was apologizing afterwards. He didn't think he played that well. I'm like, what? Are you kidding? I was watching you. But anyway, it's so sad to see these legends go. You know, I think it has to do with our age. You know, we've been around long enough that especially traveling musicians, you run into everybody out on the road several times over, and it just seems like not only celebrities that are now passing on, but even personal friends. You know, it's a reflection of our age.
Right. Unfortunately, I think they say that that's the one thing that's, taxes and death, you know. It's the unfortunate that is guaranteed, you know, in life that you know. But there's, you know, nobody gets out alive. But it is sad because you think of all of this wonderful music, and you think of more music that could have been, you know. But at least we do have the music that these people created to remember them by. David Bowie, of course, and Keith Emerson. All, you know, we did a show, the Alice Cooper Group, in I think it was like 71 or 72 in Puerto Rico, and it was a big, gigantic outdoor festival with tons of musicians on the bill. And the Alice Cooper Group was supposed to play at 11 o'clock at night, so we were all tuned up and ready to go. But the show by then had gotten so far behind schedule. But I remember at 11 o'clock when we were supposed to go on, Emerson, Lake and Palmer went on. And Keith was doing the thing with the grand piano spinning while, you know, racing up off the stage and spinning around while he's playing this crazy cool, you know, piece. And the Alice Cooper Group stayed tuned up and ready to go on stage until the next morning. And when we went on stage and we started our set with the song that we had been opening our set with everywhere, Sunrise. So Alice was hitting the microphone stand with the hammer, and Sunrise come in the morning, and the sun was coming up, and it was like we planned it. Talk about working something into the show that you didn't intend, but it worked perfectly. It looked like we
were making the sun come up.
So it's always good when nature will comply with the show.
Yeah, it was just total coincidence. I remember once something like that. Dr. John the Night Tripper was up in Canada at a festival. Actually, it was at the stadium where the chicken incident happened, but on a different show. And he came out. At the time, he had this song about America, and the verses were actually critical, criticizing things about America, and then the chorus was this thing that made it sound like America's all beautiful, and then the verses would have things that were wrong with America.
Yeah, right.
And all the crowd hears is the choruses, and of course, Canadian sentiment toward Americans wasn't at a high level at that time. But so he did this song, and the crowd started booing. So then he went backstage and came out all in his night tripper outfit with the feathers and all the voodoo stuff, and he started putting a curse on the crowd, and it started raining.
You can't get any better than that one.
Yeah, it certainly got all the people that were heckling him to quiet down.
I gotta say, he would shut me up quick.
Yeah, it was spooky.
All right. I don't want to take up too much of your time because I know that you have a lot of interviews going on and a lot of lyric writing to do. And but I wanted to thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you. And I will below or somewhere in here there will be a link to your website, and I'll throw some up to Amazon so that people can go directly to to find your book.
Oh, I appreciate it. And when you get when you get this up and running, let me know and I'll plug it. I'll get it posted on the Alice Cooper fan sites and everything.